أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وصلى الله على سيدنا Muhammad وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. Now in this presentation I'm going to show you something that will amaze you, and this is regarding the linguistic miracle of the Quran. Prior to doing this, I'm just going to explain some background knowledge and to answer one of the arguments made against the Quran. So I'm going to speak about the word Nutfah and what actually a Nutfah means. Now what critics of the Quran say is the following. They say the Quran contains X. So X is a particular word, in this case Nutfatan, and it says in the 21st century, so our present time, X is translated as Y. So what they say is, for example, Nutfatan is translated as a sperm or a sperm cell. And they say there's nothing miraculous about this, because all it is just translating Nutfatan to mean sperm. And they say it's not a miracle because it's only a translation. Because Nutfah does not mean sperm. If you go to the classical dictionaries, it actually means a small amount of water from a large amount. And they say there's no miracle in that. Now interestingly, just with this verse, it talks about Nutfatan. Here it's indefinite. The reason why it's indefinite is to indicate its small size, how small it is and how insignificant it is. Now let's first of all say a few things here. If, for example, Nutfah meant sperm, then it would be a miracle. If we could determine that Nutfah meant sperm. What's even more miraculous is, for example, this term sperm was not known in the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So there was no Arabic word for sperm. So what is even more miraculous, if it talks about a scientific phenomenon that was not known at the time of revelation, and it uses the best possible word to do this. And my argument is that Nutfah was the best word to choose to mean sperm. This presentation will explain this, inshallah. So, let's get to, first of all, a preliminary discussion. Now, here we have a root. It's the Ain, the Mim and the Lam. And from this root, we get the concept of action. Now, there's a phenomenon in Arabic, as well as other Semitic languages, which is the base letters of a word. Is that you use the same letters, but you rearrange them. And what this does is it gives related meanings. And sometimes even information about another word that has the same letters. Now let's say, for example, somebody did something. He tried to build something, for example, but he had no knowledge. That would be a crime. Here in Australia, if you were to build a house without having the proper knowledge, the proper background, this will be an offense, because you're endangering people's lives. So what do you need? There's something that you need with action, and that is ilm, knowledge. So you notice here that amal and ilm are related. You can't have one without the other. Even when it comes to religious matters, we might learn some rules, we might learn how to pray, but there's no point if one is not acting. And actually, if you don't act, it's actually a big sin. So there's a relationship between these two. Same letters, different order, and they give related meanings. Now, let's do the same thing for the word Nutfah. And this is where it becomes very, very interesting, inshallah. And you will be amazed. Now the reference is Lisan al-Arab, Taj al-Urus, and other classical dictionaries. So you can look up those meanings, inshallah. Now let's go by what the critics of the Quran say. That actually means just a small amount of fluid. Let's accept that. Okay, a small amount of fluid. Now, what you'll notice is the root of Nutfah has the root, the Nun, the Ta, and the Fa. Now those three letters, if we were to rearrange them, we get the following patterns. So they're the same letters, but they've been rearranged. What's interesting about this is that these roots actually give more information about Nutfah, and you'll be amazed. So you can look up those roots in the classical dictionaries. The ta, the fa, and the noon. Words on this root mean death and obstruction. That's very interesting because we know sperm have a hard time when they actually enter the female body. There's so many different obstructions in the way that cause problems for it, and all the sperm cells will die. Or one could enter into the egg. So either one survives or none of them survive. So subhanAllah, we get this root here, the fa, the ta, and the noon. Now, words on this particular root have the meaning to be intelligent or skillful.
Some 250 million sperms at a time are sent to the mother's womb. This number is deliberately kept high because as soon as the sperms enter the mother's body, they find themselves facing lethal dangers. There is a dense mixture of acids in the mother's reproductive organs designed to combat bacteria. This acid mixture is also fatal to sperms. Within a few minutes, the walls of the womb are coated with millions of dead sperms. A few hours later, most of the 250 million sperms will have died. If you'll notice, the sperms all travel together in the same direction. But how do they find this right direction? How do they know where the egg, no larger than a speck of dust, is? The sperms find the way to the egg because another perfectly created biological system comes into action. The egg gives off a chemical signal to attract the sperms, which are about 15 centimeters away from it. The sperms head straight to the egg thanks to this signal. In short, the egg cell, which knows nothing about the sperms and has never come into contact with them before, calls them to it. Two cells, perfect strangers to one another, engage in communication. This reality is another proof that egg and sperm are created in the most ideal form for each other.
Now, on top of this, we have two other base forms, which are the ta, the noon, and the fa. Words on this pattern mean to protrude, meaning to go beyond something. Now, in the classical dictionaries, it's actually used for mountaintops. So if you have a mountain and there's a protrusion like that and like this, so something that's extra, that goes beyond a certain point. So subhanAllah, that actually describes the movement of the sperm cells perfectly because they go beyond the point where they enter. And finally, the noon, the fa, and the ta. So words on this pattern mean movement of fluid with force. So for example, if I say nafatat al-qidru, which means the pot boiled over. And it's also used for example, sneezing. And actually in modern times, we have the word naft, which means petroleum. This is a modern day word, but the reason why petroleum got this name of naft is because of the force, the pressure causes it to gush out. Now think to yourself, is there a better word in the Arabic language or in any language on earth that describes the sperm cell better than this word? Go back 1,000 years ago and try to find a word that is better than a nutfah.
Verses 12 to 14, there are approximately 8 beautiful points, eloquent points, describing the development of the human embryo in a very unique and eloquent way. First and foremost, the Quran mentions Nutfah. Now, according to classical dictionaries like Lisan al-Arab and academic dictionaries like Lane's Lexicon, this word can mean a singular entity which is part of a bigger group of its kind, a single sperm from a collection of millions of sperms, and it can also refer to one female egg from a group of many other eggs in the ovaries.
Hamza Zortzis, senior researcher and lecturer at the Islamic Education and Research Academy, claims that a term used in the Quran called Nutfah is defined by the 14th century classical lexicon named Lisan al-Arab as a singular entity from a bigger group of its kind, and that this definition means that the term Nutfah refers to the sperm, ovum, and even the zygote, and not merely and purely to semen, which was considered as the reproductive material by those in the ancient world. Hamza's goal is for us to be impressed by a 7th century book making a reference to sperm cells and ovum and even the zygote long before scientists discovered them. Of course, then some of us decided to check Lisan al-Arab, and we could not find any definition even remotely close to a singular entity from a bigger group of its kind.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So now you've heard what this person has said, that Nutfah does not mean a single entity from a bigger group. This is actually a very poor attempt at trying to discredit the Quran miracle. And what is unfortunate is that some Muslims are starting to believe what he's saying. Now, for a person who has a basic knowledge of the Arabic language, the arguments presented sound quite convincing. But a more deeper analysis of the claim reveals a big flaw, this person's argument. And this is based on a superficial understanding of the Arabic language. Just because somebody knows Arabic, modern Arabic, and has access to a dictionary, does not mean that he is an authority in the Quran. And he's saying, because the fact that Lisan al-Arab does not mention that a Nutfah is a singular entity, it means that it is not a singular entity. Now, little does he know that actually the word Nutfah is on a specific pattern, which is on the pattern of Fu'la. So this pattern that Nutfah is upon is actually associated with the individual parts produced by the associated verb. So let me just explain this. So we have the verb, for example, qata'a, which means he cut. Doesn't matter what he cut, but he cut something. If you take the 3-letter root, the qaf, the ta, and the ayn, and you put it on the pattern of fu'la, you get quta'a. So quta'a is actually a noun that denotes an individual part that is cut. So a person could cut something in a number of pieces. One of these pieces is called quta'a. This pattern, fu'la, is also used for singular parts of the body. So for example, judhma. Judhma means one part of the body. We have the noun mudgha. Mudgha means one lump of flesh, or one chewed up lump of flesh. And similarly, we have Nutfah, which is one part of seminal fluid. Now, this science of word structure is called sarf, morphology. And this is actually studied before one gets into Arabic grammar. Now, being a student of the Arabic language, one must know this science pretty well. A question one might ask is, why doesn't Lisan al-Arab mention this? It's because this is actually knowledge which the author assumes one already knows. And this is why the Lisan al-Arab, actually one of the meanings that's found in Lisan al-Arab is al-ma'u al-qalil. So a small amount of water. Because we know that seminal fluid is made up of a large number of sperm cells. And these sperm cells actually are surrounded by water. And this is what actually the sperm cells use to travel to the egg. Without this water, they will not be able to travel. So it's amazing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually chose the word Nutfah, which has the meaning of fluid, which is like water, that is used by the sperm cell. So in the Quran we have words such as ma and mani, which is used for seminal fluid. And then we have one individual part of this fluid, which is called a Nutfah. So that's just briefly about that. وصلى على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم.